Here's our first online lab, and the topic will be bioenergetics. As usual, we're going to go first over the important terms. And so we have a pretty long list here. So let's get started with metabolism. Metabolism is defined as the sum total of all the reactions that are occurring in a cell or in a body in general. So it's a very big term, very large, all-encompassing basically. And you can subdivide it into catabolic reactions and anabolic reactions. So catabolism are all those reactions that release energy. So they start out with more energy and then they release energy and they end up with less energy. So a good example for catabolism would be the breakdown of starch to sugars, or the breakdown of sugars to CO2 and water. So we're starting out with more energy, we're ending up with less energy on the molecules, but that energy was released in some way or form. It either got transferred into other chemical bonds or it got released as heat. Anabolism is the opposite. That means we're starting out with low energy molecules and we're ending up with higher energy molecules. A good example for that would be the manufacturing of proteins from amino acids. An amino acid has less energy than the protein in the end, so we need to connect many amino acids to make a protein, and the protein product has more energy than the individual amino acids had. You might also have heard the term anabolic steroids. They build up muscle mass, so it's kind of a good way to remember that. Another good pair of terms to know is exothermic versus endothermic. Exo means out, thermic, energy or heat. And exothermic, those are reactions that are catabolic, so they release energy into the environment or release it into manufacturing of other bonds. So the bottom line is energy is released, exothermic. The most drastic example of something like this would be an explosion where you have massive release of energy, of heat or heat. Endothermic is the opposite. You put energy into the system. So those would be anabolic type of reactions where you need to put energy into and then the product has more energy than the original substances had. All of that is usually in chemistry, they show usually a delta G energy kind of balance. We're not going to do anything along the lines of chemistry here, but the energy balance is basically sort of an accounting of how much energy was there before, how much is there at the end, how much energy was released or did we have to put in. So that's the energy balance. Couple important terms also to know would be the small calorie and the big calorie. Those of you who speak Spanish, you might know the term calor. That means heat. And a calorie is an amount of energy or heat. And literally, you can figure out how many calories something has by setting it on fire and heating up water with the fire. We used to do a lab along those lines. It was kind of funny, but we're not doing that anymore. I think chemistry does a calorimetry experiment, but by definition, a small calorie is the amount of heat that it would take to warm up 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius, to be specific, from 19 to 20 degrees Celsius. A big calorie, like the ones that you see on the food labels, those are actually kilocalories, so 1,000 little calories. So one of those big calories, that's the amount of heat that would warm up 1 liter of water by 1 degree Celsius, from 19 to 20 degrees Celsius to be exact. Next up on the list of terms is basal metabolic rate. And the BMR is the amount of energy that you need in order to stay alive, not doing anything. So like we all these days not doing anything or much of anything, we're sitting at home doing nothing. So if you would take that to an extreme and just lay in bed all day long, 24 hours, do absolutely nothing, you still need an amount of energy to keep your body temperature, keep your heartbeat, keep your nervous system alive and all of that. So the amount of energy that it would take to just stay alive with no activities at all, that's your basal metabolic rate. And it's a significant amount of energy that you need. We'll figure that out later. In order to figure out the basal metabolic rate, A lot of people use the body surface area to do that, which is sort of a measure of how big your body is, and so it kind of helps with the estimation of the amount of energy that you need. The body mass index is also a way that people use to measure sort of body composition. If you have more muscle, then you have a different BMI body composition than if you have a lot of fat. The problem is that fat weighs less than muscle mass, and so sometimes when people are very muscular, they seem to have a very high BMI, indicating that they're sort of overweight, but they're really not, because they have a lot of muscle mass. But I'll show you how to sort of estimate body composition in different ways. So the BMI is one way of sort of estimating somebody's body composition, but it can be quite off when somebody has extreme amounts of muscle mass, for example. Also, going into a calculation of your total energy need is the voluntary muscle activity. So that would be any kind of movement. So up here, back here, the basal metabolic rate is the energy that you need just to stay alive. If you want to do something, and even if it's just getting up and walking around a little bit, maybe get some breakfast, do some stuff, go shopping, any time you're moving your muscles, that's going to cost you some energy, and that will be in the category of the voluntary muscle activity. So that would be physical activity anytime you're moving your body, or if you're doing a lot of work, that would be exercise. And the third category that goes into your total energy needs for any given day will be the specific dynamic action. That's the amount of energy that you need to digest your food. So that starts with chewing the food, basically putting it in your mouth. That takes energy too. Then you need to swallow it. Your stomach needs to receive it and churn it around and add some juices there, and then in your intestines you need to add more digestive juices, digest and break down the food. Then you need to absorb it, you need to transport it to the cells that need it, so all of that takes some energy, and that's in this category of the specific dynamic action. So 3 things go into your daily calorie need. That will be the basal metabolic rate, the life-sustaining functions without any kind of movement, then the movement energy, and then here the energy that it would take to digest your food. So the question is, where are we going to get our energy from? And your cells absolutely love the process of that oxidative metabolism, where we're using oxygen as the final electron acceptor, and we're breaking down food molecules completely into CO2 and water. So that would be your glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain, the whole process. That's oxidative metabolism. And so that would be oxidative energy sources, the food that you eat that you can then break down into CO2 and water. We also have some non-oxidative energy sources, and what here comes to mind is certain molecules that you have in your cells already present. For example, phosphagen, anything that can transfer phosphate and regenerate your ADP to make ATP. Or creatine phosphate is great for that too. That phosphate, this phosphate right here, it can regenerate ATP. So once ADP has released its energy and become ADP, then you can transfer the phosphate from here and bring it back to make ATP. So that's your sort of your secondary immediate energy source that you have in muscle cells. Myoglobin is sort of a different version of hemoglobin. It attracts oxygen a little bit more than hemoglobin would, and so any kind of dark red meat, like best example would be your heart, the ultimate endurance muscle, contains a lot of myoglobin, which sort of attracts the oxygen that we need for our oxidative metabolism. And any muscle that has a lot of myoglobin is typically a highly oxidative red meat kind of muscle that has endurance. So that's the first part of the lab. And then the second part of the lab is about physical fitness. And you can do all of these exercises at home. I'm going to show you what you can do there. So you guys all know what physical fitness is. And maybe it's a good idea to get out of the chair, get out of your bed, and do something, since we're all just sitting at home, being sort of confined at home right now. So you could just try these exercises. The skin fold test, maybe you need some equipment for that, but you can definitely calculate your waist and hip circumference ratio. All you need is a tape measure for that. Also, you can take a look at your waist circumference BMI risk. Sit and reach flexibility test, you can definitely do that. All you need is like a yoga mat. The Harvard step test, all of you can do that one. Target heart rate, I'll tell you more about that. So the Harvard step test is basically a test where you're exercising for 5 minutes, the harder the better. And then you measure your heart rate after the exercise is done. And the faster you return to a normal resting heart rate, the fitter you are. So if, I don't know, if we have to sit another 2 months at home, I'm sure we're going to lose a lot of fitness unless we do some workouts at home. But in the end of a long period of sitting at home, what happens a lot of times is that you get up and start exercising again, and all of a sudden you notice, oh my gosh, I'm out of breath after just walking 1 flight of stairs. And your heart rate stays up for a long time. That means that you're really out of shape. Being in shape means that your heart rate goes up quickly to meet the demand of the exercise, and it goes down quickly after the exercise. Okay, the last term here on this list is the VO2 max. The VO2 max is a really great measure for your fitness level. It's a machine that can measure that. So they will put you on an exercise bike or on a treadmill, and they will measure how much oxygen you can circulate through your system and maximum exercise. So in other words, a person that's really fit is able to process a lot of oxygen for oxidative metabolism, and that's indicative of a really good fitness. So they put you on a bike or on a treadmill, make you work out as hard as you can, and then measure how much oxygen you're inhaling and exhaling at the maximum fitness or the maximum exercise level, and that's then a measure of your fitness. MtSAC, we have a machine that I think the PE department, they have a machine. It costs you a little bit of money to do the VO2 max test, but it might be worth it figuring out how fit you are. So that's the best test right there. But let's take a look at the lab. So I'm going to scroll through the pages here. This stuff here, I just mentioned all of this in sort of the introduction here. You can read up on it on any of the specific terms. Here, the food labels, you've seen them, I'm sure. You can use these to calculate your calorie intake, which is part of the lab. And there are also apps these days that you can use to calculate how many calories you're eating, to sort of keep track of how much you're taking in. Here's some more write-up about phosphagen, creatine phosphate, so you can read up on that on your own. And then here's some examples of tests for physical fitness. You can take a look at that too. And here are the references. And now here we're starting with the procedures. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to estimate our daily energy need. And for that, remember, there are 3 things that are going into that calculation. The first one is you need to calculate your body size. So your basal metabolic rate based on your body size. And so for that, we need to estimate our size, the size of our surface in square meters, multiply that times the energy that we use per size per hour times 24 hours in a day. And I'll show you that in a minute. So I'll probably start a new recording then. Then we need to add to that the voluntary muscular energy expenditure per day. So that will be however much exercise you do. And then the specific dynamic actions, the third component of your calorie need calculation, and I will explain that to you in the next video.